Hey guys, Chastity and Greg here, breaking down the Season 3 finale of Star Trek Discovery.
Like always, warning, spoilers ahead. If you haven't seen this episode yet, get out of here, go watch it, and then come on back here. Now let's break it down.
Alright, let's jump into the episode. So first off, we're starting at the KSF Khi'eth, and we've got Culber and Saru, and more radiation is getting into the ship, and their radiation burns are getting worse. Saru is slowly and steadily trying to connect with Su'Kal to get more information, but is careful not to make him panic. Another burn could destroy what remains of the Federation, and Culber tells Saru to tell Su'Kal that he's Kelpian, as he's the only one that can get through to him.
Adira arrives with the radiation medicine, and a holo has made them appear as Zahian. Gray has been recognized by the holo, and Culber and Saru can see him and talk to him. He appears as Vulcan with blue hair.
Alright, I'm happy for him, but what does that mean? So if the holo recognizes Gray, that means Gray exists more than just in Adira's head. I guess he's somewhere in between?
It doesn't matter. They're gonna write something in to have the character show up on the ship for next season.
And Culber is made from a bunch of stuff from the mycelial network, technically. Could they do that again?
It's gonna be one sentence in the writer's room to get through this, and then they move on.
We went back to the mycelial network and we made Gray.
You do have kind eyes.
Told you. Saru tells them to find an exit and that they must contact Discovery. They only have a few hours. At Federation HQ, Vance commands Starfleet vessels to fire on Discovery. He says if Osyraa reaches the worlds they've lost first, the Federation is done for.
Meanwhile, Osyraa is setting course for Base 755, and is planning to use the truth serum on Book to get to the coordinates for the Dilithium planet. Meanwhile, the bridge crew are fighting their way through Deck 7 when suddenly, life support is shut down throughout the lower decks. And back with Vance, Stamets tells him that Saru is trapped in the nebula and he pleads to get back onto Discovery. But Vance says they can't risk sending him back and sends him off in an emergency transport as far away as possible.
So, I feel for Stamets, but Vance is making a lot of tough calls here, and I kind of agree with him. You know, he's firing on the Discovery at the risk of the Spore Drive. He's sending Stamets away. But, you know, all of his decisions are very measured and in the best interest of the Federation.
This whole season is wrapped around, basically, Wrath of Khan's one line.
That the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Feels like they're just playing that out for the entire theme, so we have scenarios where the needs of the few do outweigh the needs of the many, and other scenarios, like Stamets, it's the opposite.
Starfleet is hailed by Navarre, who sent a fleet to help. Burnham tells Osyraa she'll tell Vance to stand down. To prevent further escalation and harm to the ships in range, Burnham convinces Vance to let Discovery go.
Back on the Khi'eth, Saru tries to bond with Su'Kal using Kelpian culture, and he reveals to him that he's indeed Kelpian. And from there, Saru tries to talk to Su'Kal about the outside again, but he doesn't like it and explains why.
If outside exists, why didn't they come?
Saru tells him about the burn. He says they're here now because his mother reached out and created this world for him. On Discovery, Book is being held in sickbay. Zero wants to torture Book since the serum isn't working, but Aurelio protests. Osyraa takes the neural lock and they use it to torture Book and put him in excruciating pain.
And then Osyraa taunts Burnham and says her friends will die soon, but she can save Book if she cooperates.
It's almost too easy. Of course Burnham's gonna pretend to cooperate. Why would you let Burnham near Book? What are you doing, Osyraa? So Burnham attacks a regulator, puts a force field up around Book, steals a regulator badge, and they get away. The bridge crew is sharing a single source of oxygen. Owo says she can hold her breath for 10 minutes from her past diving experience.
They can't bypass the chain command functions and can only reboot if they access the data core in person.
Burnham uses the stolen badge to open a ship-wide channel to deliver a message to Tilly. She then destroys the badge and with Book heads towards the data core. Tilly figures out Burnham's suggestion to go to a nacelle and set off a bomb to knock them out of warp. It's a suicide mission.
We can die here, or we can die stopping Osyraa and saving the Federation.
Back with Saru, he tries to explain to Su'Kal that he is sentient and tells him that the outside has many diverse worlds filled with wonder. But then the monster appears and Saru tells Su'Kal that he must face his fears, or they'll all die. He refuses and he wants to find the Elder.
Culber, Adira, and Gray reach the edge of the holo, and Adira suggests checking out how badly the hull is compromised, but Culber said he tried and it made him sick. So Gray offers to go since radiation can't hurt him. And Culber tells Adira that he suspects that Su'Kal is a polyploid, one whose genes are affected by their environment, and this environment has massive concentrations of dilithium. The theory is that Su'Kal is genetically connected to dilithium, allowing his body to react to dilithium in unique ways. Okay, so this This is sort of like what happened with Spock in Star Trek 3, where the Genesis Project and Spock was reborn. Granted, the writers were just trying to figure out a way to bring Spock back to life after they killed him off in the last movie. But it looks like this is kind of where they were going with how he's connected to the planet, just like Spock's connected to the Genesis planet.
Adira points out that dilithium has a subspace component, so Su'Kal could have a genetic connection to subspace. And they tell Culber that Discovery's warp core reacted to a subspace radiation surge before they beamed down. Culber explains that Su'Kal got upset, screamed, and the entire ground shook. So we pretty much know what happened. We know that Su'Kal caused the burn, but now we're getting the science explained to us. Sound is a mechanical wave, and its energy travels through a medium, like subspace. Su'Kal's scream traveled at the resonant frequency of dilithium subspace components.
Culber thinks they can stop the burn from happening again if they get Su'Kal away from all this dilithium. And Gray reports that the ship is falling apart and shields won't hold much longer. And meanwhile, in the Elder's holo room, Saru tells Su'Kal that the holo program is breaking down. And while he may not have the Elder's words of advice anymore, Saru pledges to always be there for him.
So they're clearly forming a bond here, which is nice, and Saru encourages Su'Kal to face his fears once and for all. Tilly and crew drop one by one with their oxygen running low. So Tilly enlists Oo to take all their remaining oxygen and finish the job while the rest of them pass out. Oo tells them she loves them and continues the mission. Meanwhile, Michael and Book get to the turbo lift, and once they're cornered, they get outside of the lift and start picking off the regulators.
Ah, right, yes. Bigger on the inside. Do you like it?
This has absolutely nothing to do with Trek, and I'm sure through all 801 episodes there is another reference to this, but all I could think of was Monsters, Inc. at this moment.
With the doors?
Yep, that's it. I couldn't help but think of Monsters, Inc. with the door scene.
Falling through and landing on something at random reminded me of Anakin and Obi-Wan in Attack of the Clones. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have brought up that movie.
We almost got through this whole season, Chastity, without bringing up the prequels
I'm
at
sorry.
all. Every season we bring them up, and I hate it.
This is where the
This concludes with Burnham ending up in the data core room with Osyraa, and the two begin fighting while Booker and Zara do the same thing in the lift. Meanwhile, Oo is able to plant the bomb and knock the ship out of warp, and we see that one of the Zora bots is able to drag her out to safety.
Okay, so let's talk about the Zora bots really quick. Let's talk about those .23s, because this is not what I thought they were going to do this episode. Like, this is completely different than what I thought.
They saw that Deus Ex Machina moment here with these robots, and I think somewhere along the line they're like, okay, no, let's not do that. So these things were just put into the trash.
It was a strange setup from the last episode. Back with Book, good old Osyraa picks the worst possible time to threaten Grudge the cat, and Book sends him flying to his death.
She's a queen!
Meanwhile, Osyraa thinks she's finally bested Burnham, but Michael comes back with a phaser blast that kills her.
Burnham reboots the ship's systems, removes all the regulators, and restores life support. All is well. And on the bridge, Burnham tells the crew they need to get back to the nebula ASAP. So with the help of Aurelio and Book's special abilities, they eject the warp core and blow their way out of the Viridian.
Back at the Khi'eth, Su'Kal is still afraid to turn off the holo and face reality, but Culber tells him it's perfectly fine to be afraid. Just before they step into the room, Gray realizes this could be the last time the crew sees him. It won't be. He'll be back.
And finally, Su'Kal steps into a new room and puts his hand on the computer to end the simulation. And we witness his final moments with his mother. And as she died, he let out a giant scream. And yep, this is how the burn happened.
How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned?
I don't know!
Su'Kal's mother wanted him to get back to Kaminar to be with family, and she says his parents will be watching him from the stars. Su'Kal finally sees the real Saru, and moments later, while the ship is falling apart, the Discovery has arrived to save everyone.
Saru? It's us, it's Discovery!
Michael?
And in the final moments of the episode, the crew rebuilds one of the Zora bots to save the Sphere data, Stamets is still holding a grudge against Burnham, and the Federation is piecing itself back together as we see leaders of the Trill and Ni'Var working with the Federation.
Saru takes Su'Kal to Kaminar and will help him build a new life for the time being. And then Admiral Vance apologizes to Michael for standing in her way, and then he gives her the captain's chair of the Discovery. Finally, Discovery has a mission. They have lots of dilithium to deliver to distant worlds. So Burnham takes the bridge as captain, and with her crew in sleek new 31st century uniforms, the ship sets off with her command.
Let's fly.
And now for things we noticed and Easter eggs. The first shot of this episode is a holo displaying a Gormagander, an endangered species described as a space whale capable of living in a vacuum of space. The USS Discovery encountered an injured female Gormagander back in season 1 in the episode Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad.
Adira appears as a Zahian in the holo. Tilly's friend Queen Poe, who we last saw in the season 2 finale, was Zahian and the queen of the planet Zahia.
Though we unfortunately didn't get to see much of the USS Voyager after its cameo in episode 5, in this episode Vance commands Voyager to take the lead on Viridian.
Zira says,
"That's what everyone says, and then they sing like an Alcorian sorrow hawk."
This reference calls back to the short trek Calypso. Craft was from the planet Alcor 4. To make him more comfortable on Discovery, the AI called Zora played natural sounds from Alcor 4, including the calls of Sorrowhawks.
Saru says,
I've had to choose between leaving the only world I had ever known, or staying. And I, too, was afraid.
Saru is referencing his decision to leave Kaminar. He was the first Kelpian to have voluntarily left Kaminar, and the first of his species to join Starfleet. As the Kelpians were a pre-warp civilization, Saru had to accept the caveat that he could never return home.
And to bookend this season, we get an appearance from Mr. Sahil, who now works at Federation HQ and has a fancy uniform. We're happy for him. Alright, that was season 3. Final thoughts? What do you think, Greg?
I thought this was their best season so far by a mile. I love Doug Jones' performance in this episode. With that said, I feel like there's a template out there for how they're doing their finales, and I hope it stops. We've seen now, even in Picard, the season finale, where someone's getting kicked down a well like Emperor Palpatine. It's certainly not the best episode of this season, but with that said, again, I am looking forward to season 4 immensely, and I'm going to miss live action Star Trek so much because I don't know when it's going to come back. We only have Lower Decks on the horizon at the moment for 2021.
Yeah, I thought it was a good season overall too. I think it was very tightly written and there was a clear storyline for developing Burnham and her path to the captain's chair. You can see that a mile away. And I really love the Giorgio stuff. I really loved that moment where she was saying goodbye to Michael, and that was just very heavy, and I just love that they've built this bond even though they're not each other's actual Burnham and Giorgio. They had to form a new bond with the new versions of each other, and it's beautiful. I really liked that relationship a lot.
I loved all the stuff they did to make this prequel for Giorgio's Section 31 show. Unfortunately, if you took all that out and you're left with the storyline they had for just season 3 for the Disco Crew, the Emerald Chain, the villains were there or something. They're forgettable, but I understand why, because the primary thing of this season was really to establish the Disco Crew in this new timeline with Vance, who I think he's one of the best characters they've had on the show so far.
I love Vance.
Easily.
I think he's great.
Yeah. I can't wait to see him back for next season as well. With that said, the villains next season is going to be a top priority, I think, if they do some kind of villain. Let's see how it goes now, if they're going to go maybe back to the old format of Star Trek maybe next season as well. So it's like you get a planet monster or whatever of the week.
But we will get into that because we're not done. We've got another video for you next week. We're going to be talking about looking ahead to season 4. So please subscribe so you don't miss out on that.
And we'll be back here next week, everyone. Stay safe as always, and let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments down below.